customer experience is almost a victim of its own success. Everyone thinks they're doing it. We know the terms. We've got a team. We've got leaders in this space who are working on this and that, and yet it's breaking down in operations. And I agree with you, Vic. There's no intent to do a bad job. It's like no one wants to show up and like today we're gonna do what we can to make our customers jump over all these hurdles.
I'm going to torture these people and my agents.
But it's right. But it's breaking down in operations, and that's where we got to roll up our sleeves and do the hard yard, and that all important day to day decisions that are being made and processes that we're putting in place to support those decisions in that direction.
Welcome to Your Call is Very Important to Us.
Welcome to the third episode of Your Call is Very Important to Us, the journey into why customer service still stinks in 2022. I'm Tom Brannen.
And I'm Vic Cooper.
And I'm Brad Cleveland.
That's right, Brad Cleveland, ladies and gentlemen. Woohoo!
Yay! Our first guest.
We're very delighted to have Brad as our guest today. And in fact, Brad, I mean, Vic, back me up on this, but I think Brad is the best guest we've ever had on the show. Would you agree?
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, for sure.
I'm the only guest, right?
Well, the first of many, and it's not a coincidence you're first. And when we kind of came up with this concept, we wanted a list of like, who are guests that we might want to have as our very first guest, and there really wasn't a list. It was just Brad Cleveland. We've got to get Brad. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be with you guys. I'm blushing just a little bit, but this is so much fun, and thanks for the work you're doing.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it a little bit. I mean, I'm sure most of our audience may know you or know of you. You obviously speak all over the world. You've written numerous books over the years. As a consultant, you've consulted with some of the top brands in the world. You co-founded the ICMI, which is one of the leading associations in the contact center space. But I think your biggest accomplishment, Brad, is you figured out how to split time between the mountains and San Diego. That's the dream for me, and you've done it. So kudos to you. Are you in Idaho or in San Diego today?
So I'm in San Diego, and this really wasn't very intentional. Our daughter is an ice skater and got invited to be on a team in San Diego that competes across the country, and it was too good to pass up. But it's all consuming. So we came down here for that and just decided to throw out an anchor and spend some time down here. So really wasn't planned, but we're happy with how it all turned out.
Well, San Diego is the first place I think of when I think ice skating.
Right? There's 6 rinks here. It's got this amazing infrastructure of coaches. There's 6 rinks. You wouldn't think of Southern California that way at all, but it's been terrific.
Oh, wow. Well, Brad, I'm excited that you're here because I think you were my introduction to call centers back in, the late 1990s. I was like, I had a job where I needed to learn all of this stuff. And so, of course, I was looking at, what's out there. And I ran across your book, Call Center on Fast Forward. And that, for me, was the basis of just my understanding of call centers and most importantly, kind of how data-driven they are and, how there was a science behind what happens behind the phones. And of course, back in those days, it really was phones. I mean, it probably, predominantly people calling in. And then now it seems like you've gone on to kind of talking about leadership. Your latest book is all about leadership. So maybe you could just give us a little sense of your sort of like, how did you come about to write Call Center on Fast Forward and sort of become an expert in this field and sharing that knowledge?
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for that question. I have so much to be grateful for in terms of the mentors that were around me in my early career, and I didn't know where things were going to go with this whole space so much, but I kind of had a sense that this whole communication place in customer service was important then. It's going to probably be more important, and some of the legends from the SCTC, the consulting organization, you guys are very familiar with. Gordon McPherson and Dale Mullen and others at the time were instrumental in my understanding of this space. So that the first edition of that book came out in 1997. It really was inspired by a lot of what I was learning and being taught. I just have so much to be grateful for, and so many others get the credit for that.
Yeah, you're obviously have been in this business for decades and are one of the true recognized consultants and thought leaders, but you're also a consumer, and one of the things that we're trying to be about on this show is looking at things from the consumer's perspective. And we keep running into very frustrating circumstances, and that's really the inspiration for what our conversation's all about. Is this kind of disconnect between what the industry's selling, what they're talking about, and then what you actually experience. I'm sure you probably experience crappy customer service, right? I mean,
oh my!
You're not immune just because you read the book. You're not immune from bad customer service.
Exactly.
This is going to sound like the start of a meme or a bad joke, but our refrigerator quit working last week. I mean, the fridge quit. So I can't tell you the comedy of errors and hurdles in trying to get a repair scheduled, which got punted, never quite happened. We got so frustrated, it's not that old, that we bought another refrigerator. Let's replace it then. They didn't show up. The delivery kept getting pushed, and we have some travel coming up. We're not going to be here to receive it, so we canceled that. We're going back to the repair. Neighbors are going to it's just one thing after another. And here's the irony. This is a manufacturer that I've heard do many presentations at customer experience conferences. I mean, they're on journey mapping and that sort of thing. And this is quite a journey to map, the experience that we just had. And it's crazy. It's like they've got some terrific PowerPoint slides, but come on, if that's the way it is, something's not working here.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're seeing that all the time, and certainly COVID's kind of made things worse, right? I mean, like we weren't doing great to begin with, and then COVID's kind of stressed, these situations. Is that your assessment?
Yeah, and our customers gave organizations some margin for quite a while, but this year in particular, we're just hearing and seeing in surveys and data all over the place. Hey, the wait's too darn long. It reminds me of that guy in New York a few years back. The rent's too darn high. Customers are saying the wait's too darn long. I can't get through. When I do, it's the wrong place, and I get transferred around. It's just not working very well. And COVID and lockdowns and all that, I get that, but they're saying that was so last year. Let's get our act together now. So, and behind the scenes, there are some very real challenges. I want to make light of that.
Yeah.
The supply chain's been tough, and what's being called the Great Resignation and staffing challenges and all that those things are very real. But we still need to be leaders and put our organizations in a place where we're building for the future by standing by our customers today. We've got to do that.
Yeah, I recently read your new book here. Leading the customer experience. I love that it has 5 stars on it. Is that a little subliminal message for your readers to give you 5 stars on Amazon?
Didn't think about it that way, but you bet. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I don't know why, but this book is 5-star. Definitely. But I think Vic. Vic, you and I talked about on the first episode companies that don't care or don't care to the degree that they should for various reasons, whether they're a monopoly or or the low cost provider. And they kind of have this perception that maybe customer service, and offering high levels is not very important. And you and I talked at the time where that's really a function of leadership. And so when, as I've started thinking about that and then thinking about the book, that this subject is needed now more than ever. As we see these situations.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of organizations, in my experience, it's not so much that they don't care, it's just that they can't figure it out. And, like the complications of running a call center have gotten so enormous that it's just breaking right and left. And I don't know if that's your experience, Brad, of, it's like, of course, there's COVID, there's the Great Resignation, there's people working at home there, and, there's still, how do we do omni-channel? How do we deal with all of the ways that customers want to communicate with us? How do we deal with persistence, like what we talked about last time, Tom, about persistent chats? It's like the technology doesn't seem to be the problem so much as it is something either leadership or just inherent in the problem.
I agree with that, Vic. And it really breaks down in operations, the day to day. We can have a good high level plan and really feel like we're positioned well, we're doing customer experience. The real reason I wanted to write the book is customer experience is almost a victim of its own success. Everyone thinks they're doing it. We know the terms. We've got a team. We've got leaders in this space who are working on this and that, and yet it's breaking down in operations. And I agree with you, Vic. There's no intent to do a bad job. It's like no one wants to show up and like today we're going to do what we can to make our customers jump over all these hurdles.
I'm going to torture these people and my agents.
But that's right. But it's breaking down in operations, and that's where we got to roll up our sleeves and do the hard yard, and that all important day to day decisions that are being made and processes that we're putting in place to support those decisions in that direction.
One thing I liked about the book is that it's not just here's why it's important. And I mean, that comes out throughout the book, but it's much more practical than that. It's much more like if I were a leader that had responsibility over, customer experience. I mean, I would want this, like, I would want to go through the entire book because there's so much in there. And this episode is not about plugging Brad's book, by the way. But I was genuinely impressed with the amount of detail you go into of kind of a how-to. It's not just here's why it's important. Here's the big picture vision you need to have. It does take a step forward. So, how'd you kind of come about the structure for the book? I mean, how'd you kind of come about, prioritizing the different elements that you did in here? Because I thought that was very interesting.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the question. And interestingly, the structure took almost as much time as writing the book. What is the leadership progression here? What do we have to do in order? Because we did want to lay things out just step by step. And customer experience is all encompassing. It's not cookie cutter. So, but what are those major things that need to be in place step by step by step that build on each other? So there was a lot of iterations of the structure, but it is very intentional. There are 10 chapters. They're built around the 10 pillars of customer experience and what do we need to get right within each of those pillars to really form that foundation. So vision's at the top, and that's an area I used to give pretty short attention to. I mean, it's vision. Yeah, it's important to do that. Check. No, it's really important. We really have to have something that guides every aspect of what we're doing. And then the chapter is beyond that: customer experience or employee engagement, rather, voice of the customer, listening to our customers and customer service, and just they're a progression that we've got to get right. If you have a missing piece, it's not going to work. Not going to work very well.
You mentioned a lot of jargon in there, different pieces that obviously are covered in the book, but, just for the average consumer out there that is frustrated, I just talked to one of our video partners here. They just had a horrible experience and got transferred 4 times and got callbacks when they weren't available. And it's just kind of a nightmare. I mean, you've got a comprehensive book, but where do you think things are failing the most? What's the most common kind of point of failure that you see?
I really see the breakdown in operations, the day-to-day decisions, and I'll give you a quick example, a story that we ran across. We did some work for a tech support company, a software company up in Toronto, and spent some time at our support center, and there were a lot of things going right. It's a great organization, they got great software. But there were some kind of simmering problems, and their director mentioned a few of them. One being that, hey, our handling time is all over the board. It ranges from 10 to 12 minutes to one person's got north of 20 minutes handling time. Is there a limit in there? And I don't know. I mean, maybe 20 minutes makes sense for everybody. What's our mission? What are we trying to do? So I spent some time that afternoon just kind of getting to know what was happening and meeting some people, and didn't bring up handling time or anything. But the person with the long handling time, turns out he had printed emails from customers tacked to his cubicle walls. Great service, great job, fantastic. You guys got us unstuck and then some. So if anyone were to say your handling time's too long, say, well, look at the results. I mean, and I had one of his peers pull me aside and it's like, he's kind of a braggart. She said, I handle twice as many support issues in a day. So what do you do? And the director wisely decided to find out what really is the difference in our processes here. And of course, this led to quality standards and things they needed to have in place. But she took a low-tech approach. She put several of her team in a conference room with index cards and just said, write each step in a typical support call on an index card and lay them out together in order. And it forced them to kind of work through where are the differences? How are we approaching this differently? She came back in a couple hours and like, what'd you guys learn? And one person spoke first. He said, well, I'm going through some steps that get us to resolution as quickly as I can, but maybe not some that we need to make sure it's completely resolved. So there's some things my colleagues are doing. I want to make sure I'm incorporating. So this really is once and done. Well, the person with the long handling time spoke up next, and he said, all right, I'm going beyond probably what some of my colleagues here are and helping them understand the features. And they love our software. It helps them. That's why we're here, right? And every head's nodding, total agreement. And I came back some months later and everything had changed. I mean, there was a real amazing buzz in the environment. I'm like, what happened? And everyone's handling time had fallen into that 10 to 12 minute range. But what they'd done is take what he was doing on a one-off basis and build that into cross-functional initiatives. So they had a product improvement initiative that their reps were involved in a few hours a month. They had their training videos on YouTube. They developed a customer community where customers could help each other. All really cool. And the rep that used to have a long handling time is like, now we're doing what I was trying to do on a one-off basis. We're building processes around that. So every customer, not just those who contact our support center, and certainly not just those who happen to reach a specific individual, every customer is benefiting from what we're learning. So, and back to the question, in many organizations, our hero would have been the villain. Like, slam a lid on it, pal. You're taking too long. You're going to break the bank here. And that kind of thing can poison the environment and really establish a mindset that we talk a good game, but we're really not living it out in our operations. So we've got to build it out in our operations. Every decision, everything we're doing has to align with our customer experience vision and what's best for our customers. Magic happens when you do that.
You know, there were two things, Vic, I was going to kind of ask you about that Brad touched on there. One is that concept of actually talking to your agents and actually, wanting to have a two-way dialogue to kind of dive into this stuff. I mean, you talk about that a lot in the book, Brad. But Vic, the other thing is kind of that not just being a slave to the analytics. I think one of the evolutions we've seen and you've seen is it would be easy to say we have an underperforming agent that's taking too long on their calls, so we need to tell them that they need to cut their calls in half or whatever that thing is, rather than taking the step to figure out what's going on. I think most organizations would just be like, you're taking too long, move along, or they're compensated to the point where like, we're going to cut your pay if you keep having these long calls, or we're going to give you financial incentives to shorten your calls and leave it at that. I mean, that's certainly, I think, prevalent. Wouldn't you say, Vic, that kind of the opposite of the story Brad just told?
Yeah. And I think it shows that, most people who are calling in, customers, don't really understand how statistics drive call centers and how measured these agents are. And in some ways, it's like a revelation for an organization, because now they can by measuring these things, they can really control and they can, optimize and, basically get these agents more efficient. But myself, included, I couldn't work in an environment like that. To have somebody constantly monitoring me and over my shoulder and, tracking my words. And so, I think there's a way in which the statistics gathering dehumanizes the whole process. And companies rely on it too much to their own detriment. And I think what you were talking about, Brad, is a good example of, if we allow for there to be more than a focus on just efficiency, but also, building the relationship that you're having with that customer, that's so important. And I think if we were face to face, that would naturally occur, and
good point. We always talk about 3 levels of value, efficiency being the base level, and we need it. We need good forecasts, and we need the right tools, and we need to prevent work that shouldn't happen in the first place, and all the things you think of with efficiency. Good self-service options. But then the second layer, as you mentioned, Vic, is what is that relationship with that customer? What are we doing in that interaction to build loyalty and really stand with them? A third level of value is strategic. What are we learning in this process that can help us improve products and services and processes? It's a gold mine, and there's so much survey fatigue. You just can't get the kind of insight from surveys that you can from these live interactions where someone has a legitimate issue they need help with, and they happen in multiples every day, every hour of every day. And to learn from that is so powerful. So we can be, what's the old saying, penny wise and pound foolish by trying to squeeze efficiency when there's so much more there that's valuable for our organization, and everybody's going to win.
Yeah, and I think customers will also find whatever path they can to, getting that layer of service. Like, I just had the experience of, I was moving my mobile phone over to Xfinity, and so I had to port numbers over, and made me think, Tom, of your talking about porting over business numbers, but porting over a personal number. And I knew kind of instinctually that I probably should go to the store. And so I ended up going to one of the Xfinity stores and talking to a live person. And what was great about it is that he, in a sense, was calling in customer service for me. But then we couldn't resolve it during that day. There was something wrong with the port. And when I got home, it still wasn't working. So then I had to call in for myself. And I was still getting nowhere. And so the next day, this person at the Xfinity store actually he gave me, he shared text with me. So I had a way to reach him. And I reached out the next day and I said, can you help me again resolve this? And it was fantastic. By having this relationship with this agent, which is often very much discouraged in a call center, right? You're supposed to treat every agent as sort of independent and not form any lasting relationship with them. I felt like this person at that store saved the experience for me. And, by when call centers get to be so mechanized and depersonalized, I think that's where they shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, you sure want a culture and a set of processes and tools that support anybody being able to pick up where anybody else left off. But we do need ownership and accountability when it comes to certain things, and just fine and recommended to do that. That's where we really have to build our processes and our design from the point of the customer. Steve Jobs famously put it with technology, start with the customer in mind and then work back to the technology. We could say the same thing about processes and when we're structuring our organizations and everything else that's involved.
And you mentioned Apple. I mean, there's obviously examples of people that do things the right way. Do you see, obviously there's a connection between a company's overall values that can transcend down into the customer experience. The one I've been thinking about recently a lot is Chick-fil-A. I mean, it's a delightful experience to go there, and it's a horrible experience to go pretty much to any other fast food restaurant right now. It seems like they've been immune to some of the supply chain. They've been immune to some of the labor shortages. Their use of technology is really, really good. But obviously that's kind of starts at the top with the ownership that these values go down to the store. How do you build culture maybe in a contact center or customer service center that maybe doesn't have that kind of top down? I mean, can you do it successfully without that? Can you build your own service culture? Or do you need kind of that even higher up than that?
That's a really good question. It's a very practical question because you might be a leader in an organization that doesn't have, everything you'd want to see in terms of vision and customer experience from the top down. So what can you do? I've seen even within teams some amazing things happen, and they can establish their own vision. It's got to be in alignment with the organization's direction and vision. But hey, we're special ops, or we're the A team, and you've got this group of 10 or 12 people. They're just amazing. How can they outperform everybody? And it's a little spark that can really catch fire in an organization. And so you can almost build from the bottom and have higher levels and begin to see, hey, this is working. Look at what our surveys are saying. Look at what our customers are saying and how they're behaving. So it's not easy. It's not preferred to have to build, down in pockets, but you can do it wherever you are as a leader, whatever level you're at or area that you're leading. Build a vision and camaraderie with what you're doing, and then you keep working on inspiring those around you to do the same.
Yeah, I guess kind of related to that, you've kind of, because these centers affect so many different parts of the business, trying to come up with that cross-functional team that's not just the person that's responsible for the call center or customer service, but kind of building that cross-functional team to make sure you're not just in this complete siloed situation, which seems like that's where most companies are. They're pretty siloed, and there's not kind of a team that's overlooking to make sure that the investments that are made in one area will work with the investments made in another. I know you've seen that kind of frustration, and what's your take on that? And then how do you see companies that are doing it right? What are they doing different?
Yeah, well, have a culture where the team is cross-functional and it's expected that communication happens. I did some work for a beauty supply company a while back. You know who they are, pretty big and well established. And there were some blocking and tackling things that weren't happening. In their contact center, like things don't arrive on time, or it's the wrong things in the box. And this is the basics. And there was lots of grumbling about the warehouses and this and that. So I got their permission to go visit the warehouse. They've got a bunch of them, but the main warehouse where the leader of that area had his office. And it's near a major airport behind a big chain link fence and a bunch of layers of security. Ended up in his very small office because he's normally out on the floor. And we just talked for a bit. I'm like, here, and he said, thank you. No one from customer service has ever been in here. And in an hour on a flip chart, we outlined all sorts of things that they could do to make things better. And he had some things that he needed on his end. So sometimes, don't wait for permission or a team or a mandate from wherever to make that happen. Just go do it. And then that begins to be a spark for other things that need to happen.
Yeah, there's so much of that doesn't go on, and I think people just assume, well, of course, we're looking at these things and we're doing these studies and but it doesn't happen. And it's kind of the role of the consultant that can go in, and it's not that it's always rocket science. Sometimes it's thinking a little outside the box. It may be just having the time to think a little bit more about it and maybe go do some of these things that people that are putting out fires all day don't have the time to do. I know that was my experience. I mean, a lot of the really important things I did center around customer service and contact center. They oftentimes weren't rocket science, but they were kind of connecting those dots and showing leadership the value that these centers have. And I think that's probably another area that's often overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got to be bold as leaders as well. And another experience, a quick story comes to mind. We did some work for a utility that had a mandate to hit a certain service level. And this is over in the UK. And they had some survey results that weren't quite what they wanted, and some things that weren't quite happening the way they wanted. So they had us come in and do some analysis. And one of the things I discovered is they had some tricks up their sleeve. If service level was deteriorating in a day, they had their traffic controllers, they called them kind of real-time monitors watching these incoming contacts. Their traffic controller would put a block of customers out in a holding pattern if they had already waited beyond the 30 seconds. Their objective was 80% answer in 30 seconds. So calls just entering the system would go right to agents, and voila, you got your service level back.
Wow.
Never mind the horrible experience for those customers.
Juking the stats.
Pattern. And so I'm in their director's office. I'm trying to think, how do I communicate this elegantly? And it came out brilliant. Something like, that's cheating. You can't do that. She laughed. She, which was a relief to me. Like she knew where I was going with this. She's like, I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted you to. I thought you would see that and make a comment. She said, I've been here for a couple of months now on this chair. And if I've learned we've done that for years. If I change it, it's going to deteriorate on my watch. The reports are going to get bad. She's like, I know I've got to do something about this. So we talked about that. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, things deteriorate and it looks bad on you. I mean, you get fired. I don't know. What's the worst thing that can happen? How do we not let that happen then? And we talked through all the things you'd expect. Make your case, go in and show them what was happening. And furthermore, if we mask that, you're never going to get the resources you need. So she's like, right. And if they don't get it, this is probably not the place I want to build my career anyway. I'm thinking that's bold confidence. Easy for her, easy for me to say, because I'm flying out the next day. Well, months later, I'm working on something in between meetings, and I'm checking my messages on my phone, and I see her name scroll across in a press release, and she'd won a very prestigious leadership award. I'm thinking, wow, that's awesome. So I contact her. I'm like, what happened? What's the rest of the story? She said, our execs were so grateful. They said, we had no idea. We had no idea. And she said, they gave me carte blanche ability to go in and make any changes I needed to, and that they'd stand with me. And she said, I learned we were kind of fudging on things in a lot of levels of our organization, masking things and putting things in the best light. We had to rebuild on a foundation of transparency. And it was her boldness that really launched that whole initiative. And today they're a standout, just stellar customer-focused organization where everyone wins. And their employee engagement's gone way up because they're a part of something that's real. It's tangible, it's real, and you can speak up and you can do a great job. And it's just fun to produce great results.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
such a great story. I mean, I think that I've seen that many times where, as someone who has done a lot of work with statistics, that, it's very easy to take the statistics and make them kind of reflect the story that you want, especially if you're the one who's in charge of collecting the data and reporting on it. And, I've just seen that so many times that organizations, it's almost like the same people who are responsible for the performance of the call center are responsible for the auditing of it, that same performance. And so what ends up happening invariably is that they tell the story they want to be heard. So as a leader, how does a leader break through that and really find out the true picture? Because most people don't really want to get the bad news.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we end up with this disconnect between, the way contact center and customer service organizations view themselves, like how would they rate their performance versus people who are their customers calling in would rate their performance. There's usually a huge mismatch between the two.
Yeah, that's right.
And
It
how
almost feels
do companies
counterintuitive.
get those better statistics about how they're actually doing? Because I think that's industry-wide is a big part of the problem, is that we're not willing to look at how poorly we're performing.
Yeah, that's right. And averages are silly. I mean, we average things over days and weeks and months, and we lose the meaning and the detail. But we don't want to put things in the best light. We want to put things as they are. And here's where we really are as an organization. That's what's going to then give us the ability to get the resources and support that we need. And they trust you as a leader when you do. If you share the good news and the bad news, the real story, your trust, your stock as a leader goes up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so key. And we've got to. You're right about some of the survey stuff and how we kind of over survey agents and how we talked about how we focus on the analytics side. When we do get a survey as a consumer about an agent, often that's awkward. Like you might have a great agent that couldn't help you.
Right.
Or if you had to wait an hour for that agent, like, did the agent give you 5-star support? And it's like, well, I had to wait an hour and they couldn't solve my problem, but they were super nice and really
Right.
delightful to work with, but they didn't fix my problem. Do I give them 1 star because their system stinks and they're not empowered? Or do I give them 5-star and then they're like, oh, it's all good, it just seems like that we're kind of stuck in that measurement, system where we put up on the wall the average hold time, and we're slaves to that to the extent that we're missing out on these other things. So I love that story. I love the how the agent realized that maybe that wasn't the best place to work. If it did fail, that wasn't the right place to be. So I think that's such a great part of that story. And as we talk about all these failures and problems, and kind of wrap things up, it'd be easy to kind of say, well, we've been kind of struggling with this for years, and it's always going to be kind of a struggle. There's this gap between what individual customers want and what, at the end of the day, can be provided to them. There's just never going to be, that perfect, or at least we're still a long ways away. How do you kind of see things going as we come out of COVID? Are you pessimistic about this is just kind of the way things are, and that, yeah, we've moved to the cloud, but it's still the same old crap? Or do you kind of see maybe a turning point, or at least the potential for a turning point ahead of us?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. And I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist for the organizations that really want to do a great job, and they do the hard yards to put the processes and support and culture in place to do that. They're going to shine, because it's easy to have misses and not do a great job. We see that all over the place. So what better environment to really stand out? So this is an ideal time, and the technologies are available at any scale now, to any size of organization, however you're structured. The processes you can build with the right team and approach, the value that you're creating is there for the taking as you listen and act on what you're learning and build a cross-functional team. So it's an exciting time. It's a frustrating time for a lot of us as customers, but it's an exciting time if you want to build a great organization. This is just a tremendous opportunity right now.
That's a really good point. I think, you end up the poor level of customer service across the board that really creates an opportunity for a lot of organizations. It makes like in any industry where the level of customer service is pretty low, that means there's an opportunity for disruption, because that customer service, I mean, I know for myself, if there's a refrigerator manufacturer that has fantastic customer service, hearing what you've had to go through, it's like, I'm going to think, okay, if I could, all these cookie cutter refrigerators, but here's one that, has customer service up front, and I know that I can expect that level of quality, I'm going to choose that for sure.
Yeah, and the stats back that up. We're seeing now where, for a while people would make a decision purely on price, but the stats have now shown that that's flipped. And when you start to compound these other stats of people wanting self-service, wanting to take care of things themselves and wanting to go into these other channels, I think it does kind of create a huge opportunity where we're taking less menial calls. We can focus more on delivering, kind of high touch level of service with the more complex stuff. And, so I agree, Brad. I mean, I think that the opportunities there, the, question is, can organizations seize the day in that? Do they have the time and the vision to make these improvements? And I'd say a good starting point is this book right here. If I haven't said it already, I recommend it. And we're very grateful for your time today, Brad, for sharing your insight and being part of this conversation, being our first guest. You're still the best. I mean, I think I'm not going back on that, Vic.
Yeah. And I was like, the time is already up. I mean, I think we were just getting started. So, I'm looking forward, whenever you can come back and we can dig into some of these more, like I'd love to geek out on some of this stuff. And, I want to ask you, about agent utilization statistics and, how do we really make sense of these kind of measuring tools when they're appropriate to use?
Well, I'd love to come back. It's such a privilege to be with you guys, and really appreciate the podcast and the focus and, just the value you're bringing, and really diving into these things that we all need to hear and all need to be thinking about. I know I do every day. I'm learning something new. And so I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
You speak a lot. Is there any kind of place where somebody could meet you, or that you have an event coming up that they should know about?
Let's see. We've got a conference coming up with ICMI in October. I'm going to be in Chicago next week with the Midwest Contact Center Association, and there's conferences kind of on the schedule, and it's fun to be out there again after a couple of years of being virtual.
Yeah, you do a lot of stuff with LinkedIn training too, right?
I do. I've got I think it's a dozen courses on the LinkedIn Learning platform, and they do such a great job. They've got studios in Carpinteria, California, just north of Santa Barbara, and what an amazing culture and team they have. But they do a great job of they're pretty short. Most of these seminars are pretty short, these online courses, think an hour, and they do such a great job of helping you put that into bite-sized pieces that are structured well, and that you can go in and as a consumer, you can get right to some information that you need.
Well, that's great. As we ask all these questions, and ponder these things, it's great that there's resources that people can actually go to learn to do this stuff and to do it right. So thanks for sharing that. And again, thank you so much for for being with us. We look forward to seeing you out and about here soon. And just want to thank you again for being a part of the show.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Tom. Thanks, Vic. Really appreciate it.
It's great having you here.
And we'll see you guys next time on Your Call is Very Important to Us. Thanks again. Thank you for joining us today. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice. Also, you can visit yourcallis.com for links to the podcast and our YouTube channel, where you can view episodes, like, and subscribe. If you'd like to contact us, you can reach us at info@yourcallis.com. Also, let us know if you've recently had a customer service fail that we might want to feature on a future episode of Your Call is Very Important to Us. And we still have a few sponsorship opportunities if you'd like to support this important ongoing conversation. Just reach out for more details. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Your Call is Very Important to Us.